haven't spoken behind this for a while. It's been several years. I'm a little nervous here. I'm excited to share a few words with you. This is our first inauguration, our fifth poet that we are honoring. And for me, this is very special because it's certainly the first one that I've been involved with as mayor. But I think 10 years ago, we started this under Councilmember Nick Licata. And so I want to give Councilmember Nick Licata his props because he had the vision to demonstrate the importance of poetry, of art, of culture. I did a national search for Gülgün Kayim, and I have to tell you that I don't think I could have picked a better person to lead our discussion in this region on faith, love, art, poetry, music. Thank you for serving. I'm really honored to work with you, Gülgün. I want to ground us in a quote, if I may, that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. That comes from poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, and that's what I believe. And so in honoring all of you for being here, and I got to tell you, this is a little weird because I'm looking way over here and I'm trying to look at my notes to actually prepare things for me, but guess who didn't bring their reader glasses today? No, I'm good. So if I may call it Dujie Tahat by Dujie, if a first name basis, you can call me Bruce. Just today, we go first name basis. That in preparation for this, they gave me a little sample of some of your works, and I got to tell you, I was floored by the beauty of your words. So thank you, and Mama, you did something right here. You raised a superstar. So as we look at serving as Seattle Civic Poets, are the responsibilities. You have responsibilities to lead in a very special and unique way, your voice. And at a time where, coming from the White House, we hear the nonsensical hatred spewing, that here we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. We're proud of these words. We talk about loving LGBTQ plus communities, loving and supporting. We talk about race and social justice and inequality because we realize our values here in Seattle and in the Northwest must show and demonstrate to the world what we are about. We are not afraid of the fact that we are a welcoming city. And so the words that you use, the leadership that you use in this program here in City Hall chambers, I gotta tell you a funny joke, Dujie. I practiced your name Dujie a few times, but then right before I came, they said it was Doji. So I'm a little off kilter, and they did it phonetically here. I bring a little humor to say that, as mayor, I will rely on your words, that you will speak truth to power. And someone that grew up in a world that was very cruel with words when I was a kid. I think many of you know I grew up right here in the city, and I was biracial, and it wasn't exactly a popular thing to be in my neighborhood, at least. And I realized how powerful words could be to dehumanize you, to make you feel less than. But on the other hand, words could be so inspirational that the fact that my mother and father, a Japanese woman and a black man, would say how proud they were of me, how much they loved me. Well, the other words just bounced off. So this year is an important year. We have to be louder. You have to be louder. And I know, as our fifth civic poet, you will lead the way. And I'm honored to be your partner in this war that we're all in together. And guess what? We're going to win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Harrell, and reminding us that words indeed have power. And a little bit about me, as you can tell, I have this accent. I grew up in the UK, and I came from the Middle East, and where there's a lot of war. And for me, my engagement with poetry began by really connecting to war poets, because it reflected my experience. It was a way for my community to really show what they had experienced to we were immigrants, so to the broader community we were in. And for me, Benjamin Zephaniah, who was a poet and an activist in the UK, was one of my heroes. Again, an immigrant who spoke his truth. So I just want to say I'm thrilled that you have chosen to take on the extra challenge of being integrated into the political life of this city. I think that's something that's going to mark your tenure out like no others. The goal of this program was to support the practice of literary arts and to bring the arts and democracy together. So this isn't just about us telling you why arts are important, it's demonstrating that words have power and how words can help us see through difficult times, as the mayor has rightly reminded us, but also celebrate and have joy. In fact, one thing that our office has determined to do this year is to embrace positivity in these times. We have announced that we are going to take on a theme for our investments in downtown. We're doing a lot of work to support downtown activation, and we've decided we're going to invite artists to submit their applications around the theme of We Imagine a Future. The reason, we still imagine a future. And that word still is so important because despite what comes at us, we refuse to be cowed by negativity. We will imagine a future together because that's how we build our future together, is to begin by imagining what it can be. So with that, just stick to, I'm gonna invite Tom Fay, the head of our public library, to speak a few words.
Thank you. Well, thank you and congratulations, Dujie. This is it's amazing honor, obviously, to be here with you as you take on this role as our 5th Civic Poet. And in this world today, we do need kind words. We need words of truth, and we need people to speak their truth. So thank you for taking this role. It is a very important one. And while National Poetry Month is held in April, we're celebrating a little early today, but at the library, we celebrate poetry year-round. I'm guessing we can all agree that poetry is boundless and should be celebrated all the time. For every day and every situation, there is a poem that speaks to it. And just like libraries, poetry is for everyone. The post of Civic Poet helps make this idea a reality. I love that our new Civic Poet has a vision of bringing poetry into City Hall and into policy making. Poetry brings a level of attention to language that can only help make better policy and enrich the lives of the people in our city. The library has partnered with Seattle Civic Poets in many ways over the years. Last year's public poetry campaign, for example, elevated poetry, community, and joy throughout the city, including the Central Library. Thank you to Shin for your service. I'm happy to share we already have a collaboration in the works with Dujie. Seattle Reads is the library's annual citywide book club, and this year's selection is a book of poetry. The title, You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World, is an anthology of 50 new poems edited by U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon, and it even includes the works of 2 local poets. Ms. Limon is coming to Seattle on May 16th and 17th to celebrate You Are Here with all of the Seattle readers. We're excited that Dujie will be a part of the May 16th event, including sharing one of their poems to start off the night. In her introduction to You Are Here, Limon wrote that poetry and nature have a way of simply reminding us that we are not alone. I think that's a very important piece where we stand today. People are dividing us. We sometimes think we're alone. Poetry can bring us together so that we know we're not. This resonates deeply for a city that cares enough about the collective power of stories and words to have a civic poet program. Dujie, we wish you the best, and we look forward to future collaborations. It's now my pleasure to introduce José Luis Montero, who is board president for Seattle City of Literature and acting executive director of Hugo House. Both organizations bring our community together around stories and literature. Say.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to stand before you tonight and welcome Dujie Tahat as the newest civic poet of this greatest city of literature, which is Seattle. Seattle has a long tradition of poets whose work not only reflects the world around us, but also challenges us to think, feel, and act differently. Our civic poets have brought their unique voices and experiences to this role, weaving literature with civic engagement to deepen our understanding of ourselves and our communities. Our inaugural civic poet, Claudia Castro Luna, mapped stories of connection and displacement, showing us how place and memory shape identity. Anastasia Renee, her successor, confronted difficult truths about race, gender, and social justice, refusing to look away when the world asked her to. Jordan Imani Keith, our third civic poet, used eco-poetics to remind us that the fight for the environment is inseparable from the fight for marginalized communities. Most recently, Shin offered profound reflections on language and belonging, urging us to consider how we inhabit shared space. These poets didn't just document the world, they invited us to imagine something better and challenged us to work toward it. Now, Dujie steps into that lineage, carrying that legacy forward. But why poetry matters that much right now? What is the value of literature, and poetry in particular, at a time when freedom of expression, liberty, and democracy are itself under attack? The answer is simple but profound. Poetry bears witness. It gives voice to the silence, the unspeakable, and to what others might easily ignore. Poetry refuses to let truth be buried and brings it out into the open for all of us to see and hear. In moments of crisis, poetry serves as both a mirror and a call to action. It forces us to confront injustice and inspires us to imagine a more just world. And in times like this, when misinformation spreads, when marginalized voices are threatened, when civic liberties are being suppressed, when public trust is eroded, poetry reminds us that words have power. Words can cut through the noise like a sword through the fog. Words can nurture empathy and spark change. Words illuminate what truly matters. Poetry is an act of resistance. It stands against the forces that seek to silence and divide us. When democracy is fragile, poetry strengthens it by keeping the conversation alive and ensuring that no story goes unheard. Dujie now steps into this critical role with a voice that is both fearless and insightful. Their appointment as Seattle's civic poet is not just a recognition of their talent. It's a testament to the transformative power of poetry in our city. In this role, Dujie will continue to create space for conversation, reflection, and action, reminding us that literature is not a luxury, but a necessity. Their work shows us that poetry is a bridge between cultures, between communities, between perspectives. In a time when division seems more prevalent than ever, keeping these bridges intact is essential. Tonight, as we welcome Dujie as our newest civic poet, we're not just celebrating another writer. We're affirming our belief that words have the power to light the path, challenge, heal, and transform. As we celebrate the passing of this torch, we're committing ourselves as a city of literature and a community to continue listening to and amplifying the voices that speak truth to power, that bear witness to the unspeakable, and that gives us the strength to resist when the world feels overwhelming. Because nothing is mightier than an idea whose time has come, and no one is more powerful than a poet whose pen is held with conviction. Before we welcome Dujie to the stage, we will have Shin, the former Seattle Civic Poet from 2023 to 2024, give us some remarks to the following pre-recorded video.
Welcome to the first ever Civic Poet inaugural ceremony. This occasion marks the significance of having an inaugural ceremony in City Hall, formalizing the Civic Poet role in the rooms where policy is discussed and made, with language that most affects Seattle citizens every day. The Civic Poet role has traditionally been a role that ushers poetry into the public sphere to help citizens better see, hear, and experience how poetry touches civic life. In times of turmoil, poetry gives us a space to feel our feelings, to slow down and connect with other humans and the more than human world, and to reflect on the world that we want to live in. The Civic Poet role represents a partnership between the Arts Office, elected officials, Seattle Public Library, and Seattle City of Literature that provides an important opportunity for poetry and poets to be elevated. During my own time as Civic Poet, I put poetry from the community on public radio and in storefront spaces and galleries to highlight the experience of poetry in public spaces. Building upon the work of past Civic Poets like Jordan Amani Keith, Anastasia Renee, and Claudia Castroluna, who created public campaigns that looked at concerns about climate change, liberation and healing, and a poetic mapping of our city. I'm excited to pass this honor on to Dujie Tahat, whose work with civic and elected leaders and his passion for social issues will take the role in a new direction, in a time when civic discourse is needed more than ever.
And finally, the moment you've been waiting for. I'm sure you've been waiting to hear from Dujie, but let me take a moment to introduce him to you in case you don't know him. So Dujie Tahat is a poet and critic living and working in Washington State. They are the author of 3 poetry chapbooks, Here I Am, Oh My God, Salat, and Balak Bayan. Dujie serves as critic at large for Poetry Northwest, poetry editor for Moss. They got their start as a Seattle Poetry Slam finalist, a collegiate Grand Slam champion, and Seattle Youth Speaks Grand Slam champion. Along with Luther Hughes and Gabriel Bates, they co-host the Poetry Salon podcast. So help me welcome Dujie Tahat.
On desire, a firm hand, the shadow waves of satin, I'm not yet flesh. He calls me baby and I touch my face. I'm searching for God when I oil my body in the mirror. To love it means to love a man, means an opening to another man. When I take my glasses off, all the lines blur. A body is a body without language. I tell my girlfriend and she laughs, mouth wide enough to hide in. She shows me my softest parts. I dissolve into what? I forget hiding also means a good beating, the way passion can be suffering. I can't believe my whole life I never touched what made me holy. We have bread, butter, and nowhere to be. I want to begin by thanking the team at the Office of Arts and Culture. Gülgün, Ashraf Hasham, Ats Bolasai, Nadia Ahmed, but especially Zach Vermel, who has, in the short time we've worked together, been a really great partner in the work so far. I'm really excited for the next 2 years. I also want to thank Mayor Harrell for being here. It's a great honor, as well as Head Librarian Tom Fay and the City of Literature Board Chair José Luis Montero. Your formalizing of this occasion is important work for the City of Seattle. I really want to also thank Shin, who was here in the way that she can be. I really believe my work is in the lineage of people, and Shin is part of that, along with Anastasia and Jordan and Claudia. I want to finally extend my gratitude to the people in this room. When I asked if we could do an inaugural ceremony, I wasn't sure that anybody would come. So thank you. It really, really means a lot to me. I want to especially thank my children, for whom everything I do is for. I want to thank you too, Simi, my partner in curiosity and deep inquiry. I want to thank my wife, Emily Parzybach, for the unflagging support and without whom I would, in fact, be speaking to an empty room. This is the first ever Seattle Civic Poet inaugural ceremony, and I hope also a celebration of the decade's worth of civic poets. This being the first ever inaugural ceremony means, however, that we can't do it wrong, really. But perhaps most importantly, you are now all part of the great work of creating a new Seattle literary tradition. I look forward to seeing you all back here in 2 years. For my time, I'm gonna read a couple of Seattle poems because they're written by Seattle poets, and then I'm gonna present some remarks that try their best to summarize my thinking about the honor of being named Seattle Civic Poet at a time like this. The Day the Audience Walked Out on Me and Why by Denise Levertov. May 8th, 1970, Goucher College, Maryland. Like this it happened. After the antiphonal reading from the Psalms and the dance of lamentation before the altar and the two poems, Life at War and What Were They Like, I began my rap and said, yes, it is well that we have gathered in this chapel to remember the students shot at Kent State. But let us be sure we know our gathering is a mockery unless we remember also the black students shot at Orangeburg 2 years ago and Fred Hampton murdered in his bed by the police only months ago. And while I spoke, the people, girls, older women, a few men began to rise and turn their backs to the altar and leave. And I went on and said, yes, it is well that we remember all of these, but let us be sure we know it is hypocrisy to think of them unless we make our actions their memorial. Actions of militant resistance. By then, the pews were almost empty, and I returned to my seat, and a man stood up in the back of the quiet chapel, near the wide open doors through which the green of May showed and the long shadows of late afternoon, and said, my words desecrated a holy place. And a few days later, when more students, black, were shot at Jackson, Mississippi, no one desecrated the white folks' chapel because no memorial service was held. Mercy by Luther Hughes. Peeking through the clouds, Mount Rainier with its white tank top, several cities to glare upon, and a moral blue sky to angle into, must love by now to be American. When asked this by the woman in front of us on the night President Obama was elected, my mother and I in Walmart, isn't it a great night to be American? The cashier just nodded, but my mother yelled, yes, it really is, thank God, and yes, yes it was. A great night to be American. There between the bags of Lays and plague of batteries to be black in America, thank God, but oh, mountainous beast, who am I to thank now? Years later, walking home from the bus stop, surrounded by midwinter eaten trees and new-rise condos that my love wasn't shot by cops at work today, mistaken as someone else. Is there a song for this strain of mercy? At home, the light flickers above us as we sip wine, letting the TV wash our bodies into quiet laughter. I know we should spend this time spitting on the name of America, how we usually do when another black person has been killed or when another country perfumes with our war, but there's beauty unaccounted for tonight. There are crows out back tired from the work of flight and pilgrimage, ashing the branches one by one. There is the crock pot of red beans in the kitchen, its chestnut chest bubbling with bay leaves and sausage. I fear I have made a mess of being an American. Love. I'm done with the fear of never doing enough. Is there anything else you want to say about what happened today? I ask him as he takes a spoonful of home into his mouth. The laugh track on TV peppers the room and he shakes his head. What did I expect him? Black like me, American like me, in love like me, to say after dusting the day along, to get inside this four-walled pasture amid the morning of dirty laundry, the painting of a cracked moon guarding the wooden black dresser. Do you like the food? He asks. Yes, I do, I say, and kiss him on the cheek. Thank you. Swimmers Shake Hands by Robert Demelvillain, vendor number 2260, originally published in Real Change, June 1998. No need to ask. Passage, third question. No book say a word. No one on those. Hush may be unspeakable. Doubtful splendor peeling high. body, inches, mixed quotations, breezy curtains, bouncing confessions. You look again, don't you? Tangible fellows yawning, naturally no eyes. Didn't you hear? They all lived alone. Move it, surrender, forward, inevitable, the way it goes, a wondrous merchandise. Oh, marble analysis, naturally swimmers, shake hands. I've been rather insistent on having an inaugural ceremony. Not because poet laureates in our peer cities have them, not because I love a party, which I do, and not because I want the world to tell me I'm pretty, although I certainly wouldn't mind. I've insisted on having an inaugural ceremony because I believe this city, which raised me in so many ways, deserves for its poetry to be taken seriously. Seattle deserves formal recognition of the office of civic poet. And if the civic poet does not have a formal office, if the civic poet is but a programmatic line item in the Office of Arts and Culture budget in a great city of literature like Seattle, then it is my duty, as recently named civic poet, to invent one, to furnish the city with a formal ceremony in recognition of its wide and varied literary traditions. I cannot help it. As a poet, I am obsessed with the formal structure of truth. I believe in the essential role of poetry to bring people together in the provincial but necessary work of imagining a world not yet realized. This is because I started writing with You Speak Seattle, a social justice program masquerading as a youth writing program. I owe You Speaks my writing career. A You Speaks writing circle on the top floor of the downtown Central Library was my first workshop. A You Speak slam at Youngstown Cultural Center in Delridge, which I lost because I couldn't keep time, was my first publication. Hosting the Sunday night weekly open mic at Cafe Allegro in the University District was my first editorial gig, and the Wednesday night Seattle Poetry Slam at Rebar in South Lake Union was my first scholarship, the Grand Slam stage at Town Hall Seattle, my first fellowship. Here then, a short and woefully incomplete list of the Seattle poets who I watched with awe, poets who pushed the door a little wider for me as I lived and breathed: Damon Arundel, Karen Frinny-Frock, Roberto Ascalon, Denise Jolly, Ebo Barton, Matt Blessy, Robin Park, Rose McAleese, Hollis Wong Ware, Maddie Clifford, Mary Lambert, Tara Hardy, Gabriel Teodros, Nikita Oliver, Jojo Gaon, RJ De Los Reyes, Greg B., Jack McCarthy. I insisted on having an inaugural ceremony in no small part because I insist on submitting these names and places to the public record. In college, when I decided to try writing a poetry manuscript for my undergraduate thesis, my advisor told me that spoken word, particularly slam, which I'd invested so much of my own youth in and had given back to me so much, wasn't real. We were in her office, surrounded by her books and awards. I looked down at my red sneakers. Whatever slam was, she said, it wasn't poetry. It took me years to realize that this was less an appraisal of art, born of an aesthetic literary tradition, and more a political position that betrays an ethics of art. She was telling me what I made, and the people that helped me make it were not real. For a great majority of my life, between the ages of 11 and 34, I was not real. I found myself dependent on an immigration case that was denied over and over, placed in deportation proceedings, administratively closed, then when I came of age was removed from the case altogether and released into the ether outside civil law. For nearly a quarter century, I was either in process, ordered removed, out of status, without or with too many documents. I wore brown leather Oxfords when the federal judge said, "Sorry, son." My claim on the place I called home wasn't real. This brief history of my immigration status is, of course, not a matter of art. It is a series of legal appraisals. But in this telling, my old professor and the judge both take on the same temporary rhetorical and aesthetic maneuver. They both require the author, which is to say one with authority, to deny a thing, a person who lives and breathes before them, and the legal and social conditions that may or may not labor my breathing are, in fact, very real. Now, years later, we find ourselves at this dais, here in council chambers, where every day appraisals are made that have a profound impact on Seattle's citizenry. I insisted on having the ceremony in the symbolic hall of power because symbolism begs interpretation, and what I'm reaching for, what I've conscripted you all here with me now into, is the collective act of interpretation. Interpretation is the essential freedom that underlies all freedoms in a democracy. The legal foundation of American civil society rests on interpretation, lawyers dueling over interpretations of a law, never mind the rules that govern the duel. The adjudication, the decided upon interpretation archived and referred back to as precedent to reinscribe or reinterpret what a new reality, a new case, a new kind of person emerges. The seemingly endless series of interpretations and reinterpretations should be instructive for policymaking, for sure, but let's consider for a moment the act of appraisal, how it requires the author to size up a possible new reality. Thus begins interpretation. There is almost daily a moment every one of us learns the world as we knew it has ended, that our lived reality has outpaced the language we ascribe to the world. A news alert, you find a gray hair, the crocus have bloomed overnight. In that moment, you have two options. Seal the world as you knew it, or imagine a different world through a new language. I'm committed to a poetry and politics of the latter. Interpretation, at the end of everything, is an act of confirmation, of collaboration, of saying, yes, this is how it is. How should we proceed? It is perhaps my most strongly held belief that art is a social practice. Every poem, every painting, every work born of a person's mind pushed or prodded into being is to be read, to be encountered by another person, necessarily in some other time and place to be met as an act that completes its making. Collaboration, confirmation, interpretation. Like all of us, I'm a product of those who thought about and after me. Ancestors, lineage, inheritance, all yes, but also, more immediately, the people I owe. My children, my family, neighbors, colleagues, the laborers who feed, clean, tend to life all around me. No one lives alone. Seattle not only introduced me to writing, but brought me back to it. The people I write with and my many beloveds who call Seattle home remind me every day that attending to a place and people is the most critical act of writing. So too, Seattle taught me to read. In a group, sharing what we loved about poems that made us feel for a moment alive or less alone. It was in a group I learned close reading makes possible other ways of being, not just with ourselves, but with others. I'm saying here, interpretation, both the legal maneuvering and the other half of art making, is too a social practice. When I immigrated to the States, my family stayed in Seattle suburbs, which began a lifetime of orbiting the place and idea of Seattle. I've always loved the city. In my teens, I drove between Yakima and Seattle, writing, performing, and organizing with queer and trans kids of color, developing a political practice inextricably linked to community and art making. I moved permanently to Seattle shortly after college. After gigs as a nonprofit youth program manager, graveyard gas station clerk, and a business reporter didn't pan out. I accepted a job as a corporate management consultant. I had 2 young kids. My life took a detour away from writing. I returned to writing after a divorce and a career change, in large part due to Seattle, by which, of course, I mean the people writing here, some of whom overlap with my time writing in Seattle as a youth. I'm very lucky. My 3rd child was born here, my writing has done well, and I have no intention of calling anywhere else home. This is one interpretation of my life, one in which Seattle was my city long before America became my country. It is a profound honor to be named Seattle Civic Poet, to use my time to read poems with others, to bring the collaborative sense of interpretation into City Hall. Before I tell you about my project and my poetic vision for the city, you'll have to excuse me as I consider what a phrase like civic poet might mean, and what it might mean to occupy the role at a time like this. Again, I am a poet obsessed with the structure of truth. In the history of poet laureates in America, my identity makes me an unconventional choice. With respect to Seattle's history of civic poets, the 4 women of color who preceded me, less so. It was not that long ago that I appeared in literature only as a symbol, a metaphor, a projection by which the main character, narrator, or speaker learns an essential lesson. There are today what we might call the archetypal Seattle civic poets, from New York City to Tukwila, being rounded up, regardless of status, placed in prisons far from home without due process. Outside of the poem, outside of this very lovely ceremony, I'm reminded by the current political reality that I am the monster of my own country's making. I am an object lesson. I am not real. As a city, Seattle is good at a particular kind of counter, the political practice of offering the symbol the role of seeming speaker. We might refer to this as centering marginalized voices. Seattle has always loved to signify the shift from object to subject. After all, our city is the only major American city named after an indigenous person whose defining characteristic was friendliness to settlers, and our city is the seat of a county now named after a civil rights leader who warned us against the recruitment of his memory in the service of empire. I now belong to the tradition where I'm made symbol, but interpretation is what makes me real. Above all, I must insist that I am real. The role of civic poet reveals something about our city, about poetry, about how a queer immigrant poet might operate within the constraints of a city that at once both reifies and thumbs its nose at national tradition. Though I'm grateful for this post, this ceremony, the community that I am humbled would gather to celebrate any modest honor of mine. I'm unsure if the idea of the poet is widely held in high esteem. I'm unsure, too, what kind of emblem to a city or a nation's culture a poet might hold. There is a tension inherent in the phrase civic poet. Civic, as related to citizens. Poet, as in to make. Civic, because nation is a story, is a long sentence hammered into a bright line of progress. Straight, clear, inevitable, pure action. Poet is wide, contains multitudes, is both node and network and language itself. The tension between the two words is fraught, my footing unsure. The thread I string between action and language, undone by every word not met with action, and every action straining to outrun its consequence in language. What do we use this language for? What is the point of poetry at a time where the government can illegally abduct, indefinitely detain, and indiscriminately revoke the status of legal permanent residents? What can language meaningfully do if our figureheads sign the bombs my tax dollars paid for to kill 17,000 Palestinian children? What is a poet for when there are firing squads? What does my vocation with language materially do when Seattle police officers are not charged with the deaths they've caused and are only fired when they're caught joking about it? What is a poet? To say nothing of a civic poet. There are no answers, just the certainty that safety is not a place but a language, a series of relationships we agree to, a reality we apprehend together, collaboration, confirmation, interpretation. Here in the first ever Seattle Civic Poet inaugural ceremony, for a moment, we might be safe. At the least, I have conscripted you all into this shared act of interpretation. Now imagine with me, what does it mean to be conferred with the role of civic poet? What does it mean today to be emblematic of Seattle's citizenry? What especially might that mean if you've repeatedly been denied citizenship? I've spent the whole of my adult life imagining myself into our citizenry, despite what my country has told me about myself. So before aesthetics, I belong to an ethical tradition of poetry, without which I am nowhere. Alone, I am not real. I insist that I am not alone. I insist that there are people I owe. You are who I owe. You are who I love. Safety is not a place, but a language, a series of relationships we agree to, a reality we apprehend together. I've ostensibly gathered you all here to share a poetic vision for the city. So if I could, an elegy for every death, a ballad for every worker, a curse for every abuse of power, an epithalamion for every wedding, an ode for every birth. Let these poems be written by every witness. Archive them all in a great leather-bound book that has to be passed around and read from at the start of every meeting in City Hall for the rest of time. But I only have 2 years. So here are the nuts and bolts of my project. For the past year or so, I've hosted salon shops with friends and local poets at my home where we discuss poems written by other people as a primer to short workshop. As Seattle Civic Poet, I plan to expand this practice to public conversations about policy and civic life. In one-on-ones and small group discussions, I plan to facilitate public conversations with elected officials, civic leaders, and citizen boards and commissions, with a handful of poems as a precursor and framing device to a broader conversation about civic issues and policies they're thinking about and working on. The project will kick off with 4 salon shops in April, National Poetry Month, at King Street Station. The first will be a community salon shop as part of the Office of Arts and Culture First Thursdays in collaboration with jazz musician John V. Madan, followed by salon shops with City Council member Alexis Mercedes Rink, Seattle Public Library head librarian Tom Fay, and Washington Community Alliance Executive Director Kamal Shege. By starting with reading poems together, it is my hope to bring civic leaders closer to language and a shared understanding as the pretext to not only critical policy discussions, but how we live with one another. Together, we'll draw the lines that connect poetry and policy, and in so doing, dissolve the standard exchange of palliative statements that passes for civic discourse. So, towards collaboration, towards confirmation, a shared interpretation. Through the stream of a common language, and only through there, may we begin to find the grace, mercy, and love needed to survive. Thank you.